that is supposed to help you figure out the right shade. But rather than use standard RGB or CMYK color numbers like most normal people in the design world do, the government expects you to find the correct shade using something called chromaticity coordinates, which I could not figure out how to do, or the more obscure lab color system. But Photoshop cannot generate lab colors that use decimal points, so I had to hunt around for some niche website that did. And I'm still not even sure that I did it right, because I mean, does this look right to you? But then again, I was only consulting the government's guide for outdoor flags. They have a whole other set of regulations for indoor flags, but we can save that excitement for another day. Now, I realize that I'm portraying government as something that is really bossy and demanding, but it's not all bad. Government can be really generous too. For example, we have something called the Department of Canadian Heritage, which mostly exists to mail out free patriotic souvenirs to anyone who asks. So let's just take a look at what we can get here. So here we are on the Department of Heritage's official website under educational and promotional items. And they have a bunch of different categories of products available, and then you can order specific things within that theme. So let's see, I'm interested in historic flags of Canada. And sure, I'll take one of these, a poster of military flags of the 20th century. In fact, I think I will take it all. Okay, so some time has passed and I have ordered myself every single free patriotic what's-it that the Government of Canada provides. This includes a Flag of Canada sticker, a Flag of Canada temporary tattoo, a miniature paper flag, a book on proper flag protocol, which is of course not to be confused with this thing, a copy of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and the less popular Canadian Bill of Rights, and about 20 educational posters. Now, I know what you are thinking. Surely this must be costing the government a lot of money to mail out all of this free patriotic nonsense to any rando who asks. And yes, I remember when this department was created in the mid-1990s, it was considered very controversial and wasteful. But on the other hand, after it was created, it was considered equally controversial to cut funding to patriotism. So I guess the Heritage Department weathered that particular storm. I will let you know when all of this stuff comes in the mail. All right, so here is another weird government thing that I have always been sort of low-key obsessed with. Shortwave radio broadcasts. I find shortwave radio really fascinating just because it is one of the most awkwardly old-fashioned things that is still sort of lumbering along in our modern age. Here is my attempted summary of what shortwave radio is. We live in a world full of all sorts of high-tech gizmos that use so-called radio signals to communicate. Everything from your humble cell phone to the Fox News satellite. But in order to prevent all of these radio signals from interfering with one another, the government designates certain portions of the radio airwaves, which are known as bands, for one specific purpose. And then the people who make electronic devices program them to only use their assigned band. This is one of the reasons why it's kind of stupid that they make you turn off your cell phone when you're in an airplane. Incidentally, airplanes and cell phones do not broadcast their signals on the same band, so the chance of interference is very low. Otherwise, you'd expect your cell phone to get screwed up every time you're near an airport. Anyway, in order to help keep things organized, the governments of the world produce these little charts that show you what portion of their radio airwaves can be used for what purpose. Here is the Canadian chart, which is made by our old friends at the Department of Industry. All of the colored bits represent different categories of devices that are allowed to use that portion of the radio airwaves here in Canada. For example, these blue chunks are for analog televisions. This green bit here is for maritime GPS systems. This tiny bit here is for remote controlled cars. This unto itself is kind of interesting, but more interesting is the huge chunk of the radio airwaves that this chart doesn't show. The parts that haven't been specifically allocated for anything. What's going on out here is the subject of endless speculation and fascination. Much of these bands are used to broadcast audio content. It's similar to the sort of audio content you can pick up from the designated AM/FM bands using an ordinary God-fearing AM/FM radio like this one.
The Canucks will hope that they're able to dictate the play a little bit tonight in Tampa.
But to listen to audio content on the unallocated frequencies, you need one of these things, a shortwave radio. Well, actually, you probably won't get very far with something like this. Picking up shortwave radio signals can be quite complicated to do, and there is this whole rich subculture of people who invest in a lot of fancy technology in order to do it properly. Shortwave frequencies are perhaps best known for being the place where eccentric weirdos, like the late Marlon Brando, would broadcast their amateur or ham radio stations. In the old days, ham radio was sort of the Twitch of its time, a place where you could tune in and hear randos yammering on about anything. It's also where spies would broadcast coded messages to one another.
39715.
But there's a lot of other exciting stuff going on in the vast netherworld of shortwave radio, like official government broadcasts. For 67 years, the Government of Canada used to run its own shortwave radio show called Radio Canada International, or RCI. It was basically just a sort of generic current affairs chat show. Before the internet was invented, the government pitched this as a way that Canadians could keep track of the news at home when they were out traveling to other countries.
If you're planning a trip to the United States, or Africa, Eastern Europe, or Western Europe, the Caribbean, or Latin America, why not keep in touch by shortwave with Radio Canada International? For a free program schedule, contact your nearest CBC station.
But then the internet was invented, and shortwave radio broadcasts became obscure and forgotten. In fact, I must say that I had quite a challenge even finding a shortwave radio to buy. Conceding to this new reality, the Government of Canada then officially pulled the plug on RCI in 2012. If you're traveling and want to hear government-approved Canadian news, you now have no option but to listen to the RCI podcast. The Canadian government still does maintain one other shortwave radio station, however. And can you guess what it broadcasts?
CHU Canada, Coordinated Universal Time, 16 hours, 28 minutes.
So do you know any other good examples of SOGIEs? Strange or obscure government items? Don't care what country they're from? Let me know about them in the comments, and I will see you all next week.